All right. Well, it's just such a nice day. I know our numbers are a little bit scarce here today, but it's good to see you guys. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Arnold, and I've been a health coach now for about almost 7 years now. We've been a health coach, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. I enjoy teaching these classes because I learn more than what you guys are going to learn. And I think it's really important to really learn how to create optimal health. That's what the whole purpose of these classes are for, is for us to learn how to create a healthy body, to be able to sustain it and maintain it so that we can be healthy all our life. You know, Dr. Anderson jokingly says he wants to be so healthy that he shows up late for his funeral, comes sliding in sideways just as they dump the dirt on him at 104. That sounds like a good idea, to be able to be active and do the things you want to do because physically you can. So we're on week 11 right now. Next week we're going to finish with our 12-week classes, and then of course we just start over again. So today we're going to be talking about something that I think is so important to understand. And it's really there's some deep stuff that we're going to talk about, some deep science stuff, but it's really critical to us achieving optimal health for the rest of our life. And what we're going to be talking about is actually inflammation. But just to review, 2 weeks ago we talked about sleep. Sleep is absolutely critical. It's another one of those things that's critical for optimal health. We know that if we're sleep deprived, it increases our risk for gaining weight. It increases our risk for inflammation. It increases our risk for so many health issues, including diabetes and heart disease and strokes, and there's all sorts of things that it can affect. And so sleep is one of those things that most people don't get enough of, and what we do get is typically not as good as it should be, but there's some really simple things that we can do to improve our sleep. So I would encourage you, if you're still having issues there, go to week 9. You can read up on that. Week 10, last week, Dr. Allen talked about the importance of a support system. Now, I know we've got a handful of people that are here quite frequently, and just by show of hands, the group that we have here, do you find it supportive? Does it seem to help you in your goal or in your journey to achieve health, knowing that you're coming here with other people who are like-minded and have similar goals that they're trying to accomplish? Helen, did you want to say something, or you're just saying yes? Good. That what we know is that we're 171% more likely to achieve health, or healthy weight and optimal health, if we surround ourselves with people who are doing the same thing. We also know that if we surround ourselves with people who are unhealthy and have unhealthy habits, we have 171% greater risk of developing those same habits. So I'm not saying to unfriend all your Facebook friends who are not healthy or don't want to be healthy. All I'm saying is just make sure that you surround yourself with other people who are like-minded in the process. So today we're going to talk about inflammation. We're going to cover Chapter 19 in Dr. Anderson's book and Lesson 15 in the workbook. As always, we have all of our resources here. The MyTSFL site, that's a great site for logging meals, logging exercise, really keeping track of where you're at, but there's a lot of other great resources on there. Dr. Anderson's habitsofhealth.net site, and then of course the Dr. A's book and workbook are what we reference here. So let's talk a little bit about this. This is a graph from Dr. Anderson's book. And so what happens is, this right here at this point, this is kind of before the program starts, where we are at our heaviest. Now, it's really important to understand that adipose tissue, fat, produces hormones that actually create inflammation in our bodies. And so when we're looking at this, this line here, this line represents an inflammatory marker called C-reactive protein. This line represents our weight, and then the yellow dotted line represents percent body fat. So what happens is, fat is actually the largest endocrine organ of our body, meaning an endocrine organ is an organ that produces hormones. Fat produces hormones. And these hormones do a lot of different things. Not all of them are good. In fact, many of them aren't good. Fat produces hormones that converts testosterone into estrogen. Fat produces hormones that create inflammation in our body. And so as we, unfortunately what happens is, as we gain weight and our inflammation increases and we hurt and we don't feel good, we move less, we eat more, we gain more weight, it produces more of the hormones, it creates this really kind of vicious cycle, right? Yes?
Maybe you said it before, but I'm not sure what it means when you say inflammation.
So inflammation is what we typically think, we're going to get to that here in just a second. Because there's what most of us think about with inflammation, when you sprain your ankle and your ankle swells up, that's inflammation. We're not really talking about that because that's what we call acute inflammation, and typically we can get that to go away very quickly. What we're talking about here is chronic, low-grade inflammation. So we're going to really kind of dive into that. And if I haven't fully answered that question before the end of the class, ask me again and I'll explain it a little bit better. But I think I'm going to really explain that really well so that you understand just how important it is to be aware of that inflammation in our body. So what happens on the program is, as we lose weight, our BMI decreases, our body fat percentage decreases, our C-reactive protein level decreases also. Now, CRP is a blood marker. It's a marker of systemic inflammation in our body. And what we know is, what a lot of physicians use C-reactive protein for, as well as hemoglobin A1C levels, they look at those as predictors of the diseases of inflammation. We're talking about diabetes, high blood pressure. We're talking about autoimmune disorders. We're talking about a lot of these diseases that affect us as we put on weight and as we get older. Sometimes we think, well, that's just part of getting older. Well, not really. So it's really important to understand, as if our goal is optimal health, that we want to control these inflammatory markers. Now, here's the other thing that really is important to understand about inflammation. Inflammation speeds up the aging process. And I'm not just talking about looking older. I'm talking about our body function is sped up and our body literally is older or functions as if it's older because of inflammation. So it's really important to keep inflammation in control, because then our body can function the way it needs to and it doesn't get worn out as quickly. Does that make sense? So getting to a healthy weight is going to help control inflammation all by itself. But there's other things that we can do. So let's kind of dive into this a little bit, okay? This really is talking a little bit about acute inflammation. So when we sprain our ankle, when we have that bump, that lump, whatever, we get that swelling in the area, that is inflammation. Acute inflammation really helps to speed up the healing process. It's really important when we're talking about diseases where it can, inflammation will wall off that area to protect the rest of the body from maybe a virus or a bacteria or some sort of infection. When you get an infection in your arm, on your skin, and it gets all red and puffy, that redness and puffiness, that's inflammation. It's trying to seal off that area so that infection can't spread elsewhere. Okay? So acute inflammation serves a purpose to protect our body. Unfortunately, what happens is, when we have low-grade inflammation over time, it creates a lot of issues. So what we call this low-grade chronic inflammation, we call it the silent enemy because we don't really know it's there. When we hurt our back and we get all, it hurts to poke in there. You know, you can feel it kind of swollen down in there. That's inflammation, and inflammation around joints or with an injury causes pain. Inflammation around our elbow, you get that redness and that heat. We can see it. Now, with chronic low-grade inflammation, we don't really know it's there. We don't typically have a symptom that's associated with that. But it can increase our risk for a lot of issues. In our cardiovascular system, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, all sorts of different things. In our respiratory system, we're talking about asthma, infections. Our kidneys, nephrotic syndrome, there's a lot of things that happen. Gastrointestinal system, our guts, irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease. Those things, when our guts are inflamed, we don't absorb nutrients properly, so we become malnourished. We don't feel real good. There's a lot of issues in our gastrointestinal system, but we're not going to see redness, right? We're not going to see this nice red track where our intestinal system is on our skin. Oh, my guts must be inflamed. No, usually we have some other symptom involved that can point to it. With our immune system, when we have chronic low-grade inflammation over time, it really taxes the immune system and weakens the immune system, so we become more susceptible to sicknesses. So when we're really unhealthy, we're overweight, we've got all this inflammation, a lot of times we find that it's harder to overcome common colds or the flu bug, or it seems like we're picking up things more frequently because our immune system is already taxed and it's not strong enough to ward off or fight off all these little things that we come in contact with on a daily basis. Tom?
So where does arthritis come in?
Well, there's a lot of different kinds of arthritis.
Well, what I've noticed is that when I would try to do push-ups before, for a long time before, I shied away from it because in my wrist, I just could not handle the pain from putting my weight on my hands doing a push-up.
Yeah.
That has gone away. I don't have that anymore.
You know what's really interesting is, Dr. Allen and I, when we were in practice, we would see x-rays of, the spine or people's shoulders or different joints. And it was really interesting to see there were some people that had very minimal arthritic changes, but you would have thought that they were just going to die. They were in so much pain because they had a lot of inflammation. And then we saw some people, we looked at their x-rays and we just thought, how are they even walking around? It was so arthritic, so many changes, but because they didn't have inflammation there, they were able to function, not completely normal, but without a lot of pain, and they were able to really get around and do things. So with arthritis, the reason why it kind of comes and goes in some instances is inflammation, systemic inflammation can come and go depending on a lot of different factors. What we're eating, our environment, both internal, external, there's a lot of things, stress levels. We're going to talk about all those things and how they can affect systemic inflammation. So my guess is, Tom, for you, there's a couple things. So when you're doing those push-ups, first of all, you're pushing up a lot less weight now than you used to be. So there's a lot less stress. But I think that by getting the weight off, reducing the inflammation as you went through, and now that you're doing those push-ups, the inflammation in the joints isn't creating pain because it's just not there anymore, or it's much, much lower than it used to be, and so it's just not as sore. How many of you guys in here, as you lost your weight, within the first 2 to 4 weeks, you noticed, my knees aren't as sore as they used to be. I'm able to walk a little bit better. Or maybe, I was talking to one health coach today, his low back seemed to improve really quickly. Even though he didn't lose that much weight, it was because that inflammation came down. Did anyone have that? Do you mind if you wouldn't share with us? Yeah.
Oh,
What'd you notice?
Well, the first thing I know this probably sounds weird, but tying my shoes was so much
Bless you.
easier after I lost the weight. And just, and I was exercising more.
Uh-huh.
And my knees weren't hurting me as much, but I know that I was in a car accident, about a month ago, which I'd already been on the program for a while. And when they did the x-ray of my neck, they said they couldn't believe that I wasn't in more pain because my neck's all screwed up. They said,
Case in point,
you
yeah.
ought to be in pain all the time. But as long as I do my neck exercises and do all that stuff,
well, and being on the program, because you've been on the program, 8 weeks, 6 weeks?
Since March.
Okay, so a couple months now.
Yeah.
You've really been able to control a lot of the inflammation in your body, which is going to help you heal faster. It's going to keep your symptoms of pain under control much better. So, you're doing good things to be proactive and take care of yourself. That's great. Leilani, how about you? What was your experience?
That my lab work came down 4 points.
Did they check your hemoglobin A1C level?
You
Is
know,
that what
I was
came
just
down?
talking to my daughter about that, and I don't recall them doing that. So I'm going to ask for that next time.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what those numbers are.
They always do, Tom.
Her lymphocytes came down,
Yeah,
which was a big deal.
From an 8 to a 4.
that's great.
So that's really great. And
That's
I
great.
know that the leukemia is a direct result of inflammation.
It really is.
That's what I found out by the last time we were.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly what happens. We'll touch on that just a little bit, but you're exactly right. Cancers, there's direct correlation to inflammation. We'll kind of hit on that here in just a second, but you look at all these different things, the brain, the eyes, the endocrine system, all these things. Here's our cancers right here, breast, colon, prostate cancers. Those are some of the most common to be associated with inflammation. All those things are risk factors for these things all decrease as we get the inflammation down. So for Dr. Allen and I, we teach a lot of this stuff. We go into actually a little more detail as we teach continuing education classes for doctors around the country. It's been really, really apparent to us that the benefit of losing weight is not just seeing a better number on the scale, fitting into cuter clothes, or whatever our initial reasons might be. Although, Claudia, you've always got cute clothes. That's great. That's certainly a good benefit. But the benefit really is we're not just improving our life, we're extending our life because we're creating a healthier system overall. Inflammation really does speed up that aging process to where we not only have a poorer quality, but a shorter life at the same time. So that's why it's so important. Now, there's 3 sources of inflammation that we're going to talk about here. It can come from 3 different areas. When we look at this, let's talk about this right here. What happens is when inflammation increases in our body, it increases stress, oxidative stress in our body. And that's important to understand. We're not going to dive really deep into that, but that's important to understand because that actually speeds up the aging process of the cells in our body. And it forms these oxygen radicals. Those oxygen radicals basically beat the snot out of our body. And really makes it to where we don't heal as quick, and it makes it to where those cells die faster. Okay? So it becomes this vicious cycle. More inflammation creates more oxidative stress, more oxygen radicals, which creates more inflammation. So did you guys ever feel like you were kind of circling the toilet before you started to get your weight under control and getting your health under control? Like it was just like, you couldn't get out of that system. It was whatever you did, you still felt bad, or you didn't have real good results, or like your health was just continually getting worse and worse and worse. Did anyone really feel that way before? And that's a lot of that is due to this system. Because we feel bad, so we don't exercise, we go eat, we gain more weight, so we feel bad, and it becomes this really vicious cycle that we really want to break out of. So when we're talking about the external environment, we're talking about high exposure to chemicals and toxins. How do we get those? Where do we pick up all these chemicals and toxins?
Our backyard.
Our backyard? Fertilizer, maybe? Unless, do you have a chemical
No,
plant in your
that's,
backyard?
no, I'm just thinking, all the stuff we spray on plants,
Exactly.
flowers. Yeah, I mean, we're always spraying for bugs, everything. I mean,
Herbicides, pesticides,
Pollution, inversions.
pollution, right, exactly. What kind of things what was that? Sorry?
Oh, I just said chemtrails.
Yep. What about some of the stuff we put onto our body? Lotions and potions and all sorts of stuff that have that have chemicals in it. Are those healthy for us? They might make us look nice and smell nice, and heavens knows my son, 15-year-old son, needs that stuff, but yeah, maybe there's some stuff in there that's absorbed into the body that has toxins that are affecting us, right? Other things, stress. How many of you guys had a stressful day today? Who needs a shoulder massage? Get that stress out, right? Stress creates inflammation. Allergens, excess UV, and radiation. All those things create inflammation in the body. How many of you guys ever see people running up and down these busy roads? It's like, good for you, you're out exercising, however, you're sucking in all those fumes from the cars, and are you kind of reversing or negating the beneficial effects of running with sucking in all that bad stuff? Go run on a dirt road where there's not going to be as many cars, hopefully. That would be not so good too, right? Or find other things. Go run in the foothills where it's going to be cleaner air. We got to be careful with those things. Doing something good, but having something bad happen as we're doing it, it's like there's better things for us to do. So external environment. Now let's talk about our internal environment. We're talking about chronic infections. If our immune system isn't able to fight it, and we've got an infection a lot longer, well, that just creates inflammation systemically. Viruses. Here's our visceral fat here. We talked about how fat produces hormones that are inflammatory. Lack of sleep. How does that work? Well, what we know, the studies tell us, is when you're sleep deprived, Chris is back there yawning, when we're sleep deprived, our C-reactive protein levels go up. Not only that, but there's actually a connection to sleep deprivation and weight gain. So what happens is, as we're sleep deprived, there's two hormones that are produced by our body that basically shut off the part of our brain that says stop eating, or controls that so that we can not overeat. When we're sleep deprived, those hormones don't work as well. And so we don't get that signal that we're full. We continue to overeat, and we put on more weight. And what does that do? Did anyone in here, does anyone have previously have sleep apnea or problems sleeping? So do you have it still, or have you been able to really start to see a beneficial reduction of those sleep apnea symptoms as you've lost your weight? Because you've lost some good weight.
Yeah, I lost 40 pounds.
Yeah, that's some great weight. Good job. Now, sleep apnea symptoms previous to the program, and now that you've lost 40 pounds.
Yeah, I still have it, but it's not as bad as it was.
Great. So you've seen some benefits.
Oh, yeah.
Sleeping better, getting better rest.
Yeah, and when I went to my doctor, well, it's been a month ago, when he ran tests, he couldn't believe how much difference there was between me doing my exercises and all this kind of stuff. He couldn't believe the difference in my
Your body's just functioning better.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Leilani?
And Tom doesn't snore anymore.
Yes.
I know.
So you sleep so much better. I can't tell you, we over the last 7 years, we've had a bunch of wives call up and say, "Thank you so much," because they're sleeping so much better. What a great thing. Exactly.
That's what I want.
You just keep working it getting towards your goal weight, and we see a lot of people are able to do that and get off those machines. So, yeah, it's not the funnest thing in the world to have to do at night, is it? So, our internal environment, we're also talking about overuse of antibiotics. that can create inflammation. And, medications serve a purpose, and use them when you need to, for sure. Don't overuse medications, because there are, that's why they have those laundry lists of side effects attached to them. If you can do it naturally, much better. And as you get your weight under control and reach your healthy weight, it's going to be much easier for your body to heal itself. The body has an incredible capability of healing itself. And you guys are all doing a great job of putting it in position to do that. So that's what I really love. Now let's talk about food, because this is the thing that, I think most of us, if we really saw these two lists here, we'd probably go, yeah, that makes sense, right? That I could see how those things would create inflammation in my body. But most of us don't really think about food, how food increases inflammation. So we're talking about a high-calorie diet, a high-carbohydrate diet, a high-fat diet, and we're really talking about the bad kinds of fat. We'll hit on what those are. We're talking about lots of sugar. Sugar is very inflammatory. Tom, with your arthritis, did you ever notice that when you ate something sugary, your arthritis was worse after that? Did you ever put that connection together?
I think I did.
Okay.
Where I really put it together was like Mexican food, stuff like that.
Mexican food caused your arthritis to get worse.
Well, and then my fingers would swell up twice the size, and everything was stiff. And, there was just so many things that over the last several months it's just gone away. I love Mexican food. Being from Houston, I had some great Mexican food down there. But what is Mexican food for most people? It's a high-fat, high-carbohydrate diet, right? And we always eat more than we should because it just tastes so stinking awesome. So we just keep going. We eat 4 bowls of chips, that huge burrito that there's no way it really should fit inside of us, right? But we eat the whole thing. Well, it seems like all those kinds of carbs, biscuits, gravy, sausage, all that great. Butter.
In moderation once you get to your goal weight, just so just saying.
There's so much of it out there.
Right.
That, I could really get going about all this.
Right.
Of the huge change that has happened in my life.
Well, and what happens is it's a lot of processed stuff these days. Processed stuff with not a lot of nutrition, but a lot of carbohydrates. It's really kind of been stripped of the nutrition, hasn't it? So we're talking, refined grains, simple sugars. Here's our omega-6 fats. Now, we talk about omega-6 fat. Let's talk about the fats here in just a second. I'm going to show you a different chart. Overcooked and charred foods. How many of you guys like to eat well-done steak? I say that because Claudia talked about how she likes to eat leather.
Outside. It's got to be red on the inside.
Oh, well, see, having a nice sear on the outside is good. Right, I want to faintly hear the moo in the background with my steaks. But, when we overcook our food or we char our food, it changes the chemical components and it can really increase inflammation. It actually, we know that the studies tell us it's actually carcinogenic when we eat too much of that charred food. Which, on a brisket, though, that's just... Okay, I got weaknesses, all right?
If you do your brisket, when it goes around the road,
Rotisserie?
you don't have to char it. It can be really good.
Yes, it definitely can. It definitely can. I've had a lot of good brisket from Texas, so I'm a big fan of that. Let me just check something. Okay, we are going to get to that. All right, so we already talked a lot about these things, but let's just hit them real quick again. Processed foods. Lots of chemicals. Our body recognizes it that way, and it really puts a serious taxing on our immune system. The carbohydrates, we already talked about that, really increases the inflammation. I think that's where Mexican food gets you. Either that or some of the spices maybe doesn't sit well with your body. D, all of the above. Yeah. Fats. Now, this is what's really important to remember. Some fats are anti-inflammatory and some fats are very inflammatory. So some are healthy and some are not. when we talk about it, really, and I'm going to point out the things that I think are the best things in here. When I think of anti-inflammatory fats, we're talking about omega-3 fatty acids. So olive oil. I would be careful with some of this. I really wouldn't go peanut oil. Olive oil, almonds, avocados, great. That's really where I keep to with my anti-inflammatory fats. I don't do vegetable oils, corn, soybean. I do canola occasionally, but I try to keep my fats here. There is some science out there that looks at saturated fats and doesn't put it high in the inflammatory category. It really becomes inflammatory when it's combined with carbohydrates. So like the Atkins diet, which is a protein-fat diet, when you're on the first part where it's all that fat and protein, no carbohydrates, we're actually seeing people's inflammatory markers drop. Once they add the carbohydrates back, it skyrockets like crazy. So you got to be careful with that research here because really this one here, coconut oil, is actually great. It's a little different than animal saturated fat. Coconut oil is very high. What is it, 90%? Doctor? 93% saturated fat, but 50% of that is a fat is what's called monolaurin, which is actually really healthy for us. It's got antiviral, anti-protozoa, antibacterial properties. It gets broken down very easily and used as ketones, which is a great energy source for us. So we really like coconut oil, but you got to be careful how you use these saturated fats. Overall, most of the time, especially trans fats, are very inflammatory. Now, when we're looking at omega-6 fatty acids, when they're in healthy levels with omega-3, so we're talking about a 1-to-1 ratio up to 1-to-3 ratio, so omega-3s to omega-6s, it's actually very healthy for us. The problem is, because the American diet is so full of processed food now, we're really in a ratio more of like 1-to-25, 1-to-35, and our omega-6 fatty acids are so high now that it does actually create a lot of inflammation. And so these processed foods, again, they're just lots of carbohydrates, lots of inflammation, the wrong kinds of fats in the wrong proportions, and they're just not very healthy for us. So we want to be careful with the fats that we're eating. When we were in practice, we would always recommend when someone had a lot of inflammation, we would recommend fish oil supplement. Having a fish oil supplement has been proven to reduce inflammation. And you really want to be taking more than 1,500 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids in your fish oil supplement. So read the back of the bottle. A lot of them are only 1,000 milligrams per serving. So you want to make sure that you're getting enough. And really, the biggest benefits come when you're doing over 3,000 milligrams of fatty acids a day in your fish oil supplement. So kind of watch that, and you'll see great benefits. Yeah?
There was just a recent study that said fish oil was a non-factor, essentially, that taking it didn't have any effect. So,
do you know who did that study?
It just came out in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think.
Huh. You have to get that for me.
Okay.
Be interesting to see. Science changes all the time, is always evolving. So you got to keep on top of that stuff because, yeah, you never know. I mean, 10 years ago, it was all saturated fats are bad. Now we're seeing a lot more information about some saturated fats are actually very good for us. So yeah, give me that article. I'd be interested in seeing that. Let's see. Let's go ahead and go on to the next one. So here's some things that we can do to really keep that inflammation under control as far as some tips and guidelines for our diet, okay? Keep to a healthy weight. A lot of you guys are working on it. A lot of you guys are already at your healthy weight. Stay at a healthy weight. What's really interesting is lowering daily caloric consumption is one of the tools, one of the things that scientists are looking at to extend our longevity. So they're talking about reducing caloric intake 15% lower than what we need on a daily basis. So what's the result of that? we really lean out. Our fat, our body fat really decreases. So we get down into that more athletic body fat composition range. And the result of that is with less fat, it's less of those hormones are produced that creates inflammation. So in other words, our aging process slows down quite a bit because we don't have that inflammation in place speeding it up. So lowering our daily caloric consumption, keeping to a healthy weight. Eat good fats like the omega-3s and monounsaturated fats. Polyunsaturated fats, limit those. A little bit is okay. I wouldn't do a lot of the polyunsaturated fats. Avoid the bad fats. Avoid overcooking and charring our food. Eat more fruits and vegetables, especially low glycemic vegetables and antioxidant-rich vegetables. So if it's a low glycemic vegetable, it's going to be lower carbohydrate. It's not going to create that inflammation. Antioxidant-rich vegetables and fruits, when you're not on the program, remember no fruit while you're on the 5-in-1. But if you eat fruits and vegetables that are antioxidant-rich, they actually help to fight those free radicals and that oxidative stress and inflammation. Eat more fiber. Boy, this is a great one. Fiber is so beneficial to controlling inflammation, controlling cholesterol, helping our gut system be healthy. It's so beneficial for us. Avoid the sugar, especially the really refined stuff, the refined carbohydrates. High fructose corn syrup. Without diving into a lot of information about high fructose corn syrup, our body processes high fructose corn syrup different than it processes glucose. So what happens is, I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version of this to keep it really simple but informative. Glucose, 80% of glucose is metabolized out in our muscles and our organs of our body. 20% of it goes to our liver. Once it gets into our liver, the majority of it is converted into glycogen, which is a really healthy storage form of energy. So whenever we're exercising and we're getting tired and we feel that second wind kick in, we're starting to burn glycogen. That's healthy. And we can there's actually been studies that show we can store a lot of glycogen. We mostly store it in our liver. We store it other places also. We can actually have an enlarged liver because of a lot of glycogen in there, and that's perfectly okay. So glycogen is great. We want that to happen. Less than 1% of glucose is stored as triglycerides through the liver. Now, high fructose corn syrup, or fructose in general, 0 is processed or metabolized out in our body. 100% of it goes to our liver. So that's the first issue. The second issue is it's very inflammatory. It also has an effect where it decreases nitrous oxide levels. Now, nitrous oxide is a vasodilator, so it causes our blood vessels to open up. So when nitrous oxide levels drop, our blood vessels constrict a little bit, and what that does is it increases blood pressure. So the other thing, now the one beneficial area of high fructose corn syrup is in elite athletes. High fructose corn syrup is actually converted quicker to glycogen than glucose is. The problem is all of our energy drinks that are loaded with high fructose corn syrup that our teenagers are drinking, they're not elite athletes. Not even close, are they? And so what's happening is that fructose is going into their body, not being converted into a healthy energy system, but about 30% of it is converted into triglycerides and stored as fat. Some of those triglycerides are stored in the liver, which eventually can create fatty liver disease, not a good thing, and then the rest of it's stored out in our body system as fat. So not a good thing, right? So watch your high fructose corn syrup. We drink about 5 times more than we did about 30 years ago, where we got it primarily from our fruits and vegetables. When we consume it with fruits and vegetables, with all the fiber and other vitamins and minerals, it's okay to have that. It's now that we have all this processed food and these energy drinks where we're consuming way too much of it. That's where we're seeing a lot of the issues that are happening right now. That's where non-alcoholic fatty liver disease comes in. It's because of the fructose that we're eating. Yes?
Can you actually reverse that by avoiding the high fructose or reverse it through the health?
It's hard.
Okay.
It's hard. Most doctors kind of say you're going to have to deal with it. Now, if you eat a diet that's high in fiber, very low inflammatory, and cut out that fructose, it takes a lot of time to get that fat out of the liver, but it can be done. It's just a difficult process for most people. Yeah, good question. Let's see, the other, cooking with anti-inflammatory herbs and spices. And then here's, I don't fully agree with this last statement, incorporating modest amounts of antioxidant-rich foods such as red wine and dark chocolate. I think that's just justification for people to drink more red wine and eat more dark chocolate, because I think you can get the beneficial things in a lot of other areas, keeping in mind that alcohol is extremely inflammatory to the body. So I would recommend, although Chris Gaines pointed out, as we talked about stress today, that the red wine helps with stress, lowering inflammation that way. So I had to say kudos to you on that one. Yeah.
Now, the green tea, is it bad for you when you're on your 5-in-1?
No, you can do that, just don't sweeten it.
Well, I buy the decaffeinated green tea.
Yeah. And even having caffeinated green tea. Caffeine is a thermogenic product. It actually causes us to burn calories. So it's not that caffeine is a bad thing.
Well, when I have very much caffeine, I'm hungrier.
You're burning more calories. That's what's happening. So, yeah, I mean, and that's a personal choice whether you want to do caffeine or not. It's just caffeine is not necessarily a bad thing when it comes to burning calories. What happens, though, with inflammation is teas contain catechins, which are very anti-inflammatory. They're very good for us. So, white tea followed by green, then black, that's the order of highest to lowest levels of catechins. Great herbs. Not only do these herbs help us avoid the typical flavorings that are full of sugars and fats and things like that, but they're great. Not only are they going to help us flavor our food in a healthier way, but they're anti-inflammatory as well. And then, of course, I think I've said enough about those two items. And then stress. So let me ask you this. How many of you have ever had one of those stress headaches? And you've had that stressful week or decade? The teenage years, right? I'm just moving into that. It's a lot of fun. And you feel your traps tighten up, the muscles right here, your suboccipitals right up underneath the back of your head, they start to tighten up and you get those headaches coming on. There's a very physical component to stress. We notice it mostly with those tight muscles and those stress headaches and things like that. Some people will have heartburn or ulcers form. Ulcers are an inflammatory process as well. So stress really needs to be controlled. And in today's high-paced society, it is so easy to just get snowballed by what's going on that we don't even realize how stressed out we are, do we? So it's really important to make sure you are taking regular steps to control stress in an effort to control our inflammation, right? So here's a few things that we suggest. De-stress your job. We're not talking about going postal and taking your boss out. We're talking about a lot of other things. Whether it's your commute. Now, we don't know what traffic is here in Boise. When I lived in Houston, that was traffic. Or, Buddy had traffic in LA. That was traffic. So, luckily our commutes aren't bad. I talked to a teacher up in New York who's considering having me help her get healthy, and she said she has a 2-hour commute each way every day. Just thought, there is no way on earth I would do that. No way on earth. Anyway, 2-hour. De-stress your job. Find ways, whether it's going earlier, going later, whatever, to avoid traffic. There's all sorts of different ways to work around some of the issues that typically stress us out. Exercise is so helpful for decreasing stress. Now, if you're on the 5-in-1, make sure you follow our exercise protocol. Remember, in the first 3 weeks, we really don't want you doing much exercise. If you've been exercising, talk to your health coach. If you've been on the program for longer than 3 or 4 weeks and you want to start exercising, talk to your health coach. We'll gradually implement that. But exercise is really beneficial for lowering inflammation. Socialize, get out. I think that's one of the things, though, that when we don't feel very good and we don't feel very good about ourselves, we kind of become hermits, don't we? I was talking to one of my clients up in Chicago, and she's just like, people are getting to know me again because I'm getting out. She's down 64 pounds at this point. And she's like, I just feel like I'm living again. So she's out socializing and she's loving it. Go natural. You keep your underwear on. We're talking about hitting the mountains, getting outside. Again, though, walking next to busy roads is kind of counterproductive, right? Get out somewhere where you've got some clean air. That really helps with stress levels. Treat your body to a massage. You know what? We heard, who was it? Was it Tony Jury? Robin Sharma, thank you. Robin Sharma says, get a massage every week. I live with a massage therapist, and so I get like one a year. But I'm going to have to go massage cheat on my wife and get it from someone else, I guess. Laugh. Right there. We all lowered our C-reactive protein level. Get out and have fun. Do that stuff. Focus on the positive. If you focus on the negative, what do you get? More negative, right? More stress, more bad things. There's always something positive in every situation that we can find. If you focus on those things, the good things will come. And then deep breathing, one of the best ways to do that. Meditation is great for reducing stress levels and controlling inflammation in the long run. So I guess the wrap up here is, if you really start to understand inflammation, when we have high levels of inflammation, we're just not going to be healthy and we're going to age quicker. By getting to a healthy weight and doing simple little things with our diet, it's one, we're going to be able to keep our weight down, but two, we're going to be able to reduce inflammation to the point that our body will function in a healthy way much longer. We'll be able to remain active, remain healthy throughout our life. And does anyone have any questions? Well, then I guess that's it. Appreciate you guys being here tonight. Thank you guys, and we look forward to seeing you guys again next week.